this wonderful September 11th. If I could have everyone stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please, Mr. Philbin.
Mr. Brock,
Present.
Mr. Rappich,
Present.
Mr. Rossetti,
Present.
Ms. Duhai.
Here.
Mr. McBride,
Present.
myself, present.
I will entertain a motion to table the meeting minutes from August 14th, 2023.
I'll make the motion.
Do I have a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Rappich,
Aye.
Mr. Rossetti,
Aye.
Ms. Duhai,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Aye.
myself, aye.
I'm here this evening as well.
Oh, sorry.
Jeez.
Sorry.
It's been a long day.
Sorry.
You're also present.
I'm also present.
Mr. Neal,
Aye.
All right. Our first agenda item this evening, Mr. Ray, if I could ask for a little bit of your perspective, input, get us started.
Yes, sir. So the first agenda item is related to neighborhoods A through G in Oakstead. As the commission knows, the Oakstead subdivision is going to be completed in phases. The entire redesign of the subdivision was done in 2021, and this is the first phase of neighborhoods that they are ready for final engineering and plat approval. So tonight, there's no hearing required. The hearing took place back at the preliminary stage. So tonight, it's just a review and recommendation from the commission on these first few neighborhoods A through G. It's 263 residential units. There's different size single-family lots, and there are just a few duplex lots planned. I believe Dan Olson from Crown is there tonight to answer any questions, and Tim Paulson is also on the line. He can answer any questions about the outstanding engineering items that staff recommends the commission approve subject to final engineering approval.
Thank you very much, sir. Questions or comments from the commissioners amongst ourselves or a representative from Crown?
Now, Mr. Olson, do you have anything for us this evening?
Well, not really. I think it's pretty self-explanatory. It's just per the preliminary plat. Probably the only thing I would like to point out, I think it's kind of cool. So this is our first, seven units of Oakstead, includes the school site, of course, but it also has three really neat parks. One 5-acre park that's going to the park district. I've been working very closely with the park district on that. As a matter of fact, last week we kind of talked about our contribution to those parks, which is $70,000, and what she would like to do that. So our planners are designing that right now on her behalf. She's got great plans for these parks, both there and the one that we've just built on Allen Road. So there's that 5-acre park that's going to the park district, and then there's another 1-acre park that we work with her, Laura, on that's adjacent to the school. So that's all part of this subdivision in different neighborhoods. And then there's one very large 10-acre park, which is, if you ever drove back past that area out, there's a large stand of oaks out there. We purposely preserved those oaks, and that's going to be a park that's going to go back to our HOA, because the park district prefers fewer trees, obviously, for the recreation purposes. So just a few of the unique features of this part of the subdivision. I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Good.
Good.
Any other questions, comments, internal commissionary discussion?
No, not good.
Mhm. I'll entertain a motion to recommend approval of the final development plans for neighborhoods A to G in the Oakstead planned residential development.
I'll make that motion. I'll second.
Mr. Rappich,
Aye.
Mr. Rossetti,
Aye.
Ms. Duhai,
Yes.
Mr. McBride,
Aye.
myself, aye. Mr. Neal,
Aye.
you were not forgotten this time.
Keep me out of it.
Get too close to the end of the year.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
So, thank you.
We have chickens to talk about. Right?
Mhm.
So that's that. Let's do it. Thank you much.
Thank you.
I will hereby open a public hearing for and consideration of a text amendment to the zoning regulations governing the keeping of chickens in residential areas. Has anyone just signed up to speak on this particular item? Mr. Vasselli, I'm asking you to get up over your skis, I guess.
Of course, no. There's only one public speaker, Annette Feathering. Am I saying it correctly?
Featherling.
Featherling, sorry.
No,
Featherling.
not on
Miss
this topic.
Featherling, are you here for the chickens?
Not on this topic.
That's it, and, the room is otherwise empty, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Josh, if I could, just for the record, I believe we do actually have to state announcements and such as to the public hearing and whether or not it was announced properly, and if there's any further input before we close the public hearing.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. Notice of this public hearing was posted in the Daily Herald as noted in your packet. I can't see the date right in front of me, but it was between 15 and 30 days ahead of this time. It's in there in the packet. Other than that, no other notices are required for a text amendment, which is what this hearing is for.
And it looks like it was published August 27th in the Herald. Okay. I will then close this public hearing at 7:07 p.m. Our next agenda item, item C, is a motion to recommend a text amendment to the zoning regulations governing the keeping of chickens in residential areas. Questions, comments, deliberation?
Mr. Ray, can you give us a background on how we got to these text amendment changes that are in front of us?
Yes, sir, Mr. Neal. So the village board originally passed the ordinance with the understanding that it be a one-year pilot program. So that year was up in June, and afterwards they evaluated some feedback that was received, both a few surveys that were completed, and then President Reed actually held a small meeting with some of the current licensees to discuss their pain points and suggestions. And I attended that meeting as well. So at the end of that meeting, President Reed brought to the board, I think it was 4 different suggestions for changes, and the board discussed, deliberated, and a consensus was gained on 3 of them. So the 3 changes tonight are to increase the number of allowable hens from 4 to 8, to allow for chicks essentially to be inside until fully feathered. That's to deal with weather. It's actually common in other ordinances that way. And then increasing the height of the runs, the outdoor pens, from 6 feet to 7 feet in height. Apparently, most of the prefab ones are somewhere between 6 and 7 feet, so people were having a hard time finding runs under 6 feet without doing their own building and constructing. The other item that was not that the board did not feel, or there was no consensus on, was eliminating the screening requirement. So the screening will remain as is, that the coops, or rather the runs, have to be effectively screened from neighboring properties. And of course, this is just the draft. This is just the draft. If the commission would like to make any modifications and recommend something to the board, you're certainly able to do so.
Thank you, sir.
Is there a limit on the licenses that the village will issue, Josh?
Yeah, the board sets that from time to time. Right now, it was just increased. Well, the board has decided to increase it from 10 to 15. And at the same time that this amendment goes to the board, they will also make a motion to increase it to 15.
And do we still, out of curiosity, do we still have spite licenses, I think I'm going to call them? Because I think 1 or 2 people have signed up and not actually done anything with them.
I think there are either 2 or 3 licensees that have not gotten a building permit to actually build their coop. So I don't know. I don't have any idea why they haven't, but I think
Okay,
that's the,
Mr. Chairman,
yes, sir.
is it true that the limit, or rather changing the limit from 10 to 15 is not an issue that's coming before this commission? That's strictly decided by the board?
My understanding, and I think you and I both were at that village board meeting that evening, I don't think it's an issue per se. I think it's just they're expanding the program because there has been some adoption to it. And that's why part of the reason I did ask as to, we do seem to have 2 or 3 people that did sign up for the permits, but have not taken it to that next step. So I don't think that affects.
My question is, setting the limit is not the business, for lack of a better word, not the business of this commission, it's strictly the business of the board?
I see where you're going with this. Well, as it is in an ordinance, I think we do need to be involved. It does need to come in front of this commission because it is in an ordinance.
Okay.
And because of the topic, I think Mike Reed was looking to just have a little bit more collaborative approach. The board to review, refine.
Well, the reason I'm asking is because in the agenda supplement that Mr. Ray gave us, it states that the board gained consensus to increase the number from 10 to 15, but it's not listed anywhere in this zoning text amendment.
Well, doesn't the text currently read the board has the ability to change the number of licenses at their discretion? That's how it currently.
Which was my question.
But I think I see where you're going. They didn't vote on this. It wasn't an agenda item, if I recall correctly. This was just more of an open discussion.
There's an open discussion.
At which the village board did come to a general unofficial consensus, which they are now presenting to us to discuss amongst ourselves, to then make the official recommendation back to the village board. So I think in this particular case, Mike Reed is just looking for a little bit more of a collaborative. They've had a non-official discussion on the matter and arrived at an unofficial consensus. So now it's coming to us officially to discuss and collaborate. We'll set it right on that,
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question?
by all means.
If the number of permits is at the board's discretion, why isn't the number of chickens allowed per permit also at the board's discretion? Why is that coming before us, that we're changing from 4 chickens a permit to 8? Because that's a proposed text amendment, is the number of chickens. It seems like we're using 2 different measuring sticks. So can we change the number of chickens per permit to be at the board's discretion, and they can deal with the number of chickens per permit?
We can make our recommendation this evening,
Yeah.
and then that's what would go to the village, and obviously they can. So, we can discuss what's in front of us as to, do we see the benefit to the village? Do we see the benefits changing of the ordinance in these numbers and these quantities? And by all means, we can have our own discussions, comments, and then motion to keep it at 4 or to increase it per the recommendation. So,
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I agree with Mr. Hunt. The number of permits as well as the number of hens that should be kept, I think, should be up to the board. They seem to fall within the same kind of category. If the board wants to change the amount of hens that can be kept, just like they have the authority to change the number of permits, I just think that's better placed at the board level. Next time, there may be an increase to permits or hens that are allowed. I think that's a board decision, not so much planning and zoning.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not going to disagree necessarily. I'm happy leaving it in the hands of the board. However, I will split the hair and say that the number of chickens, like building materials, like height, like screening requirements, actually does affect property to property, the aesthetics, the mechanics, the calculus of the thing, whereas the number of them scattered throughout the village, less so. So I would argue that a number of hens could be something that would be brought before us and would be more germane to that conversation, like a lot of the other components within the code, whereas the number of overall permits less so. But I have no problem tendering that over to the board's discretion and via code either way. I have no problem.
The permit shouldn't exist to begin with, but the number of chickens is Jermaine, the executive said to what we're dealing with.
I'd like to interject that we have an area limitation on a coop in the fenced area. I think the area limitation makes sense to come before the board. You know, understanding the enclosure and the actual structure of it, but the number of chickens that you put into it, I think is more of the board's discussion item, not necessarily our discussion item. At least that's my feeling on it.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I want to reach out to learned counsel.
Thank you.
As long as the number of chickens is part of the zoning code or the code, isn't that the business of the planning and zoning commission? As
Well,
long as it's part of,
yes,
Yours?
and remember, all the decisions, respectfully, this is just a recommending body. So all the decisions do lie with the village board. And the point of having some items go before the planning and zoning commission is to gather those facts that are not as easily ascertained at the village board level. It's easier to come in here and get some facts and then send a recommendation one way or the other. And to, Mr. Rappich, am I pronouncing that?
You are, that's just right, thank you.
To Mr. Rappich's point, we have a lot of zones where you may be able to have a liquor license, but the number of liquor licenses in another body. In that type of analogy, the number of licensees in the chicken coops is almost akin to a business type of licensure, which is more along the lines of a village board decision with the input of this board. This board also has the ability to make, at any point in time, as recommended by the village board, recommendations on issues of policy if they're sent over. So, long-winded way of saying, respectfully, you guys can make whatever recommendations you want, and the board can go one way or the other. That's just, we're a non-home rule unit, so that's just the way the law is.
And I would also reference again, just the actual analysis, the 3 points that we are being asked to discuss and deliberate is not the number of permits, but it's the number of chickens, the height of the chicken runs, and whether or not to keep them inside until they're fully fed. So those are the 3 points that we need to discuss and deliberate upon. If there is a recommendation that we, as a consensus, if we reach that point, do we keep it at 4, increase it to 8? Do we keep it at 6 feet to increase it to 7?
Are there any things out there from a humane aspect that limits the amount of hens, chicks, whatever per square foot? So are our areas that we have limits, is there something that's out there from a humane side that limits the amount of hens that can be in that square footage area? So that way there's a restricting factor there regardless. You can't, unless you're increasing the size of your coop, you can't have more than XYZ hens per square foot. Similar to like what it would be for, and I know I'm stretching here, but life safety. You've got a certain amount of square foot per person that is able to occupy that space. Is there something from a humane aspect that limits that per our square footage?
I don't have the code in front of me, maybe Mr. Ray can expound. I believe there's a stipulation in the code, number of square footage per hen.
Okay,
Not in the run, but in the coop.
gotcha.
Am I correct on that, Mr. Ray?
Yes, sir. I believe there must be at least 4 square feet per hen in the coop if it has access to an outside run. And if it does not, if it's just the enclosed coop, I think it's 10 square feet per hen.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just a quick and dirty, ugly research. That was the first thing I came up with. Absent a run, 8 to 10 square feet per chicken is the humane way to keep them. Again, that's not a governing thing. That's not detailed research. That was the first result I got, and it jives.
As long as we're still in the discussion phase, just to let my fellow commissioners know where I'm standing, I have no problem with item number 2 and 3, raising the height to 7 feet and allowing the chickens to stay inside until they get fully feathered. But I'm opposed to raising the number of chickens from 4 to 8. I would like, I would like to see that eliminated from our recommendation, but that's of course going to be a group decision.
Well, we can vote on the agenda item
Mhm.
as stated, or we can actually also slightly modify the agenda if we do not come to a general consensus. If you stated, we have a unofficial conversation, collaboration, discussion on similar, we can slightly modify the motion. That's part of our job. So are there any other discussions on items 2 or 3, or as written verbatim? Are items 2 and 3 generally acceptable? And we see that we need to discuss item number 1.
I'm fine with 2 and 3.
I'm fine with 2 or 3.
Is it a fair assessment? All right then, in that case, if there's no further questions, comments, or any input additional, I will entertain a motion to recommend a text amendment to the zoning regulations governing the keeping of chickens in residential areas. The analysis items 2 and 3 to stay as stated. However, the number of hens, it is this board's recommendation, should stay at 4.
That was Bill's recommendation, not the consensus.
Well, I'm making that motion that if someone is willing to make that motion, that we
I'll make that motion.
present that to the village, and then we will vote on that motion. If we vote on that motion and we pass it, that is our recommendation. So if you are not comfortable with that, you can vote.
Mr. Vasselli, as the way that the motion is stated currently, if the vote was to go one way or the other, are we done with this item?
Yes,
Correct.
I mean, it can be sent back from the village board.
Correct, but how do we vet through maybe 2 different motions that may exist at the back?
So it has to, well, do we get a second?
We did that.
Not yet.
Okay. So to engage, that's a point, you're a point of order, essentially, which you don't need a second for. So no, if that passed, it would be done. It would be 4 chickens and 2 and 3 stay the same. Another technique that you could do mechanically is you vote on 2 and 3, and then you leave open the item for debate on 1 and the number of hens. Either way is fine. If there's a second to 4 and it passes, that's over. And then the board can send it back with different recommendations. Procedurally, you can go either way. And you could also, because you could also call to split the question, where you eliminate it at this point in time. You need a second. And then you would split the question, and the question would then remain, you end up at the same spot. You're voting on 2 and 3 and then 4, or sorry, you're voting on 2 and 3 and then item 1. I'm getting confused with my numbers, 1 through 4. But the issue of the number of hens remains open. So there's a couple different ways you could do it.
And how would we present another motion regarding this topic that isn't what was stated by the chair?
Well, there's a second on the floor.
There isn't.
No, we're calling for a second.
Correct.
There's either a second, I don't want to say it dies, or it's not, the motion's not perfected if it doesn't get a second. So you can withdraw the motion if you don't get a second, or you could ask for a friendly amendment for items 1 or 2 and 3.
What do you mean a friendly amendment?
That means that with regards to, the easier way to do it is if there's not a second, we just go back. The easier way to do it, we go back and we do it, someone calls for a motion on items 2 and 3. Because it seems like there's a consensus on items 2 and 3. And then we kind of debate, I shouldn't say kind of, then we debate item 1 because that issue is still up for deliberation before the board. So you can withdraw your motion if you want to. If there's no second, eventually there's no perfection to the motion, and then it reverts back anyway. That's probably,
And we can reapproach it, and
100%, yeah,
and someone else could motion,
yeah.
I would motion to break these items out into 3 separate votes.
Correct, or 2 separate votes. A combined 2 and 3, which is.
Yes, I could do that.
And with
Well,
Robert,
I thought that's what the motion was.
no, the motion was for 4 hens, remaining 4 hens for item 1. And then for 2 and 3, as written. That was the motion as I understand it. Josh, is that the motion as you have it?
It is.
Okay. So, in one thing about Roberts, there's sometimes, like, there's different ways to get to the same resolution. I'm giving you what I think is the most expedient for how I see the board sitting right now. Seems like everybody's good with 2 and 3, so let's just knock that out and duke it out over number 1.
Well, since-
Poor choice of words.
Mr. Chairman, since I'm confused, I withdraw my motion.
Okay, motion fails.
He withdrew.
He withdrew.
It's
So
withdrawn.
anyway, if there was no second, the
Yeah.
motion would fail.
And no one's objecting to him withdrawing?
No.
Okay.
I will entertain a motion to recommend a text amendment to the zoning regulations governing the keeping of chickens in residential areas, pertinent to items 2 and 3 as written.
So moved.
Seconded.
Mr. Ravitch,
Aye.
Mr. Rosetti,
Aye.
Ms. Duhai,
Yes.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Myself, aye, and Mr. Neal.
Aye.
Now, as to the remaining item number 1, the number of allowable hens, seems like we might need a little bit of further discussion.
You can also pose a motion, and that, just because the motion's on the floor, doesn't mean anybody even who makes it or seconds it has to vote for it. So just to open up the discussion, to follow the Robert's rules in a more purist sense, is you can make the motion for a number as written, or with 4, or with 1,400, doesn't really matter. And then you can work backwards on that. I mean, the ideal would be if there's a number that you think we have a consensus on, you make the motion for that number you go for.
So, to open it up for discussion, I believe that our village board has a much more streamlined approach at adjusting this number if it comes to that point where currently President Reed has already kind of got an unofficial consensus to move it from 4 to 8, that's why it's back to us. But to Commissioner Duhai's point, if there is indeed pushback from the village or residents in the village that say 8 are too many or 8 isn't enough, taking that directly to the village board to adjust that number, to me, is a much more streamlined process than it coming to us first, going back to the village board. That's my stance, and that's where I'm aligning with Chris.
If
This
I'm
is
not-
the business of.
Like I said, if I'm not mistaken, the agenda supplement that we have in front of us is more of a courtesy that the village board did discuss unofficially. It should come to us, no matter what, first, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct. This isn't,
Yeah.
the questions of one of limited scope, not of number, not
So-
one of jurisdiction.
So Mike
And right
Reed,
now, the jurisdiction lies with this time.
Mike Reed is offering us courtesy by providing additional information that we can use in our discussions, as opposed to the alternative, where, yes, sir.
Yeah, if I could, I just want to clarify. I think perhaps what Commissioner Neal is suggesting is that he might make a motion that the recommendation be to change the language of the code such that the board determines the number of hens from time to time. That might be his motion.
That is indeed where I'm trying to get to, is that the board makes recommendations at time to time at the.
Would you like that motion? Would you like to make that motion, and we can vote on it?
I would like to make that motion.
I'd second that.
We have a motion and a second.
Motion to change.
And Mr. Vasselli, if I could lean on your legal expertise.
Please,
As far
lean on me. Hold on.
8 is enough, and lean on me. We're making all sorts of TV and movie
Right.
references this evening.
I'm looking at the agenda, everyone, but got it, thank you. Okay.
I'm hoping and assuming
Yeah.
that as far as the actual verbiage that ends up in the village board's hands would be legally sound. So as I might stumble through wording
No, you're
the
fine.
actual motion that has just been presented and seconded, I'm assuming that you would clean it up.
Absolutely.
It's presented.
And we'll do some research to make sure that the jurisdiction can revert back. If it doesn't, I'll come back to the board and let it know.
We have a motion and a second.
So the motion is to make a text amendment, Mr. Ray, to allow the village board, rather than the planning and zoning commission, authority to increase or decrease the allowable number of hens allowed within the village.
That's
From-
what I understood your motion to be, yes.
Yes.
Right, so what are, we're making a motion to.
We're making a motion to amend the text within the ordinance, authorizing the village board to increase or decrease the allowable number of hens. And just taking and moving that authority from the P and Z where it's at currently in the ordinance to the village board. Very similar to their ability to adjust the licenses from time to time.
Motion to amend the text of the ordinance, authorizing the village board to increase and or decrease the number of chickens.
Increase or decrease.
Mr. Neal, can I have a clarification on one point for your motion?
Yes, sir.
That would be effective in stanter, meaning fancy legal words, right now. So when it goes back, they can then make an immediate call on 4, 8, 32,
Yes,
48, whatever it is.
yes.
Okay. Because the recommendation of a number should come back with something from the board. I just want to make sure it's very clear that they'll be able to make that vote that night.
Yes.
Okay.
And moving forward.
And yeah, prospectively. It'll be-
Prospectively moving forward if this is approved by the board.
Correct. Can we ask Mr. Ray, because he's going to be working with us on the implementation of that? Mr. Chair, is it okay if we?
Yeah.
Press button? Josh, does that work for you?
Absolutely. Yeah, it'll be an easy change. We'll just make it the same language as the licensure right now.
Mr. Repich.
Aye.
Mr. Rosetti.
Aye.
Ms. Duhai.
Yes.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mr. Neal.
Aye.
I will now entertain a motion to authorize the chair to report the actions of the commission with appropriate findings of fact and recommendations to the village board of trustees.
I'll make that motion.
Who's making the motion?
I'll second.
Okay.
No, you're fine.
You're not here.
Mr. Repich.
Aye.
Mr. Rosetti.
Aye.
Ms. Duhai.
Yes.
Mr. McBride.
Aye.
Myself, aye. Mr. Neal.
Aye.
Public comments, we do have,
There is one. Do you want me to run it up? May I approach, Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, feel like I'm back in court.
If he said no, would you make a paper?
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
Ms. Annette Federling.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Hi. Just wanted to come and talk in front of you. I mean, I know, Light Properties is why I'm here. I just wanted to talk to you where I'm not rushed and where we're not being, kind of paraphrased by what people's impressions are. Overall, I want to say thank you for what you guys, have done, especially special uses, voting that down. It gives us at least, some hope and some relief, on where this may or may not go. But I want to thank all of you. I know impressions across the board with such long hearings and some of the comments and things, I appreciate there being feedback. And I just want to say sometimes the dialogue isn't how it is perceived. There's a lot of fear. There's a lot of frustration. There's a lot of hope. So I'm just here to kind of build a bridge back, I guess, a little bit and explain. I feel if we had more of an opportunity to speak with you folks or with the trustees, it would look different. Anyway, I am here on a topic as well. I'm going to be sending some paperwork over to put it formally. I'll send it over tonight. But I do want to ask that a traffic study be ordered or asked of the Light property and the Lights to use the deposit money to do it before the vote. I know it's not your vote. I know I'm talking to the wrong folks. I recognize that, but, I'm desperately concerned. Beach Road, semis, the volume of traffic, no turn lanes, trucks pulling over on the side of the road you can't see. It goes, the list go on and on. I have been at, farmers markets, at car shows. I've seen you folks around sometimes, and you know, we avoid eye contact. And it bothers me that we're here. My husband grew up here. I moved here for a reason. I'm sorry. I would like a traffic study to be ordered of these people so we have an idea of what is going to be demanded of you and your tax dollars. Everyone wants this money from these 3 million square feet. You can get tax money from other types of 3 million square feet. Doesn't have to be this. Put some solar field in there. Do something else. I didn't want to cry. I had a picture of a semi that went off the road. I'm putting it all over Facebook. Whether or not you hate it or not, I am. Because people need to think about this stuff. It's scary. And I beg you guys to talk to the trustees. Please. No, I'm good. I'm good. Wait, thank you. I'm embarrassed, but I'm all for them selling the property. Get it the heck away from me. But you know what? There's some on the other side of the 38 acres, and there's some down the road, and there's some over by the Getzmans, and so on. It's gonna keep coming if you guys set, and I don't mean you set the bar here now, it's gonna be going on and on and on, and I'm gonna be in Florida or in Georgia where I don't wanna be. Please. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I myself do not have any announcements. Mr. Ray, do you have any announcements from village staff?
Just remind the commission, we do have business, or you all do have business at the next meeting, September 25th. I believe the public notice has gone out for the Tina Harrow property at the southeast corner of Big Timber and 20. So that will be before you for consideration.
Thank you, sir. We appreciate you.
We do. Second.
I will entertain a motion to adjourn at 7:38.
Mr. Repich?
Aye.
Mr. Rosetti?
Aye.
Mr. Hyde?
Yes.
Mr. McBride?
Aye.
Aye. Mr. Neal?
Aye.
Thanks, everybody.
Thing that I wasn't in attendance, you guys had talked about UBCS, that
Oh.
text amendment. I watched the YouTube video just to catch up.
Yeah.
You guys wanted to bring it up again?
Hey, Josh, are you going?
Adjourn.
Yeah.
Peace.
Maybe next meeting. I just
Yeah,
wanna double check.
as a matter of fact, yeah, we did vote in favor of an agreement, Grace, but I did want to talk about it just from your point of view. So while it's already been approved and likely approved by the village board, I just wanted to hear it from you, to make some of those significant changes. See if we can get it on the agenda. Yeah. Cool. I think you know the check, don't you?
It was an interesting meeting. I don't have to entertain the motions all the time. You guys can